Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This podcast is made from the spaces I host every week where I have conversations with members of our community from the Social Impact Level Up Collective. If you don't know me, I'm Wendy V, and I'm a coach for socially conscious entrepreneurs. I help you develop your social impact mission, clarify your vision, and turn your ideas into action. Every week, I talk to leaders with a social impact mission about money mindset and manifestation. We hold weekly spaces for our collective to join forces and change the world. Now, I work across multiple platforms, including social audio on Clubhouse and other platforms where you'll hear me interacting with members of our collective. This podcast is a very special episode. This is an episode where I am talking about a policy. Now, if you don't know, I started my career in policy pretty much 15 to 20 years ago, and I won't give away how old I am, but I will say I have a lot of experience looking at how policies impact people. I'm always interested in talking to other people who are looking at the intersection between how policies and our communities work. Now, I had the opportunity to talk to April and Nick on Instagram Live. We went over the Freedom to Vote Act and spent some time digging into why this act should have been passed. What happened immediately after our conversation was the vote was blocked by the Senate Republicans. Now, it's not a complete defeat because that just means that we have more opportunities to push forward the types of policies that we want to see to make sure that voter equality and equity are reached. Now, I think that there are a lot of things in this policy that were really good, and you'll hear in our podcast episode from our IG Live that this policy actually had more good things than we probably knew about. We probably didn't know we wanted all of these things, but they are important to us. So we can't stop fighting for these things to happen. And that's why this is an extra special podcast episode that I am releasing for you to hear about, just as this has happened this week. And I want to make sure that you have our latest information about the opportunity we missed out on related to the Freedom to Vote Act. So I hope you will enjoy this extra special episode. You'll hear other episodes that are from Clubhouse, maybe from the Fireside app, lots of different spaces where I'm having these types of conversations with members of our collective. Join us in these spaces. You can follow me wherever you need to find me, and I will be continuing to talk about issues just like this. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff in this act. I sent you guys my Cliffs Notes because I was able to roll through all 500 something pages of it today. And I went and just highlighted my thoughts on where does the policy interact with the people? Because I think sometimes we forget that policy rolls downhill. So the federal government tells the states what to do, and the states tell the locals what to do, and then the locals give us resources or hopefully give us access to things that we need. And so when I look at this stuff, I think about it as my last experience voting here in Harris County, which I know y'all are familiar with some of the ballot boxes challenges we had and some other things that had going on. And it's absolutely just, and hey, I see Mr. Jones is here with us. So yeah, I think it's really exciting that we have these types of laws that they're trying to put in place that something can actually be standardized. Because we know that if Texas can put up a barrier, Texas is going to put up a barrier. Yes. So that's what I loved about this type of policy is that it gives you like more access, but then it also at the same time makes it standardized for people to have a similar experience across the country, which I think is important. So some of these things were just what's in my head, but I'm gonna let y'all talk and tell me what you guys thought when you were looking at this just in general, and then let's dig into what we wanted to share about the actual conversation related to some of the stuff in the bill.
Let me just clarify. I am not a law expert.
Girl, neither I am I? April's the only law expert here.
Yes, by any means of the imagination. But I'm familiar with all of the drama and trying to keep people out and all of the difficulties. And I had some information. I think it's about like 43 new laws or different ways that you can marginalize people so they can't vote. Different ways that you can block people. It's not just one way. It's about 43 ways, I believe.
That's insane.
And I'm sure they're thinking of new ways every day. Like, we're probably at 46 and we're still talking about 43.
Yeah, because I got this information, I believe, in July here. We were getting ready for was this year? I think it was last year. But anyway, we learned that there were about 43 forms of voter suppression.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, I just thought it was like, oh, you can't vote, you can't vote.
I know one of my friends is saying for real. Yeah, for real. You see a lot of them layered on top of each other because they're not standalone practices. You'll see two or three things that kind of come together, and then it really makes it difficult for people to navigate different systems, because even in this law, I saw things like a certain number of ballot boxes for population. I was like, get out. Harris County is so big, they gave us 2 drive-up ballot boxes. They were like, peace deuces. You're like, wait, hold on. We have how many million people? Y'all want us to drive up to 2?
Yeah. And then what happens when it's overrun?
Largest city in the country, and we have 2 boxes, and they're trying to limit it again. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. I had a chance to, first, I'm not an expert in this area of the law, but I do have a law degree and I'm an attorney. I've read the bills and have the understanding of, what happens with the bills. And a lot of times when bills are written, they're written very broad. So it leaves a lot of room for interpretation, which unfortunately, depending on who's interpreting the law, could be the problem. So, or it could sway it one way or the other. So that's the major thing. And that's what any bill that's written is. A lot of times when they leave it so broad, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. So we just have to be cautious of that with any piece of legislation that they bring forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and I'm just telling folks to please, if you want to talk about it, bring your friends, tell them we're doing this. We're going to be here for a minute. So you're not coming late to the party. You're just getting started. So it is interesting about the interpretation, because the state plays a big role in this. And I think that sometimes people don't realize, because we get the thing from the local person. So we see the county, we see the city, we see wherever we live. But the state is the whole key to the situation, because the money goes to them to make sure that things happen. And in this bill, there's certain things that's like money goes to the state to make sure that you're actually tracking people's voting correctly, like the registration part of it, that you're actually putting different checks and balances in place at the state level. And hey, Anita, we see you. And so there's a lot of things that the state is just the key to the whole situation. But if they interpret something one way and it's not standardized, then of course you're going to get all these different practices, and that's where we're at right now. And so I think there's a couple things in here that are really exciting. And particularly, I mentioned in my text to you, I was like, I really want to talk about this thing with reentry and voting and people who've been convicted of crimes, because I think that is, one of the issues I've been passionate about is juvenile justice for the longest time. That is one of my top issues that I've worked on. And it's not just about coming back to the community and you get your life back. That's not how it works. You have to actually reintegrate into, and the community has changed and you have changed, right? So all of these things, little benchmarks of moving back into the community, help you keep going down that road. And it really is about this word recidivism, which a lot of people don't know what that means, but it means not cycling back into the justice system. And in order to really stop that cycle for people, you have to give them things. You can't just have to come back to nothing and be like, okay, I'm here surviving, I'm cool now. Like, that's not how this works. And so one of the things they were mentioning in this bill was that giving them back the right to vote really humanizes and brings people closer to community so that they can engage in their civic duties. And so my question to you guys is, what are your thoughts? Because to me, I was like mind blown when I got to that section that had other things that are important, 2 or 3 pages. That section has 5 pages in it. And I was like, go ahead with whoever wrote this policy, because you hit the nail on the head with the stats and the states and like everybody who's had policies all over the place that have caused Black and brown men to not be able to vote, which ultimately then means that the things that we get and the elected leaders we get are not representative of us. So I just want to hear what you guys think about this.
I think it's great. I learned about the recidivism rate when I was in my undergrad taking criminology, and I learned a little bit about it, but I'm seeing it in real life. My son had a conversation with someone who didn't think that Clubhouse is real, and that's where we all met. And what kind of name is Clubhouse? And somebody, that's not real. That doesn't make any sense. People are able to talk on social media. That doesn't make sense without
And then
video.
they become friends. Like what?
So I was just thinking that when this person is released from prison, it's a totally new world. And it's so funny because the world is constantly changing at such a rapid speed that it used to be like 10 years ago would be a huge difference. It could just be 18 months.
Yes.
And there's a huge difference. You're going to be coming back to a metaverse and NFTs and cryptocurrency. And
I've been here and I still can't figure that out.
so it's just anything that can allow the recently released inmates to become part of the community, that's great, because they may have forgiveness in their hearts. They may have forgiveness with the state, but when they come back into the community, they still could be alienated. So just the fact that they are given voters' rights, that's fantastic.
Yes. Yes, it is. And just the sheer number of people that fall in that category is just astonishing too.
Yeah, so I've done like a little bit of research in this area. I actually did a clubhouse room
Oh,
uh,
cool.
on representation in prisons. And what I found is that even though prisoners cannot vote, they are still used in the prison numbers for a particular area. So their representation actually matters in the area, even though they don't play an active role in their legislative process in the area where they presently are. So they are not only removed from their community where they used to have representation, which takes away, because there's a large number of minority people in prison, not only it takes away from their representation in their community, which takes away from the dollars that are given to that community, then they're put into a community, usually in a rural white community, and they get that representation in numbers. And this was a big deal during the census that we just took, because the prison system, a lot of states are trying to rectify this. So some states are saying, we're either going to count you where you came from, or we're not going to count you at all. And my thought process is maybe we shouldn't count them at all, because they're not playing an active role in where they are. And if they are, then they need to have the right to vote, because if they're working in the prison and they're pumping money into their community, they need representation too. And even though you count towards the number of votes that a mayor or representation of how many representatives this particular area would get, you really don't get the right to determine who is representing you. And they have a direct impact on what goes on around you, the local laws, the local ordinances, the water systems that go to the prison system.
The flood policy.
Right. They have direct control over that, but you don't have any say in who is representing you. And I'm glad that they are adding something like this to the bill. I do feel that it should go a little bit further, because I think that if you're being counted, you should have a right to vote. And that should just go across the board. Like, no one should be marginalized and not have a right to speak up for themselves for anything that they have done. Because we need to, if we're going to do it for this, we need to do it for that person. So I just feel that it doesn't go far enough. And the way it's written, and this goes back to interpretation, the way that clause that you highlighted is written, there's 2 states, I want to say Maine and Vermont, that it doesn't matter who you are, you have a right to vote. It's problematic because if it's taken literal and it doesn't give states the right to maybe go a little bit further, it could potentially ostracize those people who already have a right to vote, because their state basically gives complete right to vote. And we don't want a state to say, it says only if you're in jail, you're convicted of a felony, you don't get the right to vote. Could theoretically say the federal law says that we don't have to give you the right to vote, so they can take it away. So that's my only gripe about it, is that, again, when their legislation is broad, it's open for interpretation, and we just have to be cautious with that. So I think that the bill could go a little bit further, but it is a absolute great step in the right direction, because we saw one other thing in Florida. Florida actually had on their ballot in 2018 where they gave the voters the right to restore voting rights to convicted felons, and they voted too. And then we saw the governor try to put what could be interpreted as a poll tax, because you had to basically clear all of your debt to society, including any money that you may have to pay in restitution before you gain that. And we know that could mean that you would die and never get the right to vote. Definitely, this is a move in the right direction. I agree.
I didn't even know that had happened in Florida. That's interesting because some of the things in this law literally say states, you have to do this, but you can't add extra things that make it harder for citizens to do things. And this is definitely a great lead into automatic registration, because when I read that, I was like, cool. Like I have enjoyed when I've gone to the DMV or wherever, and they're like, do you want to update your address in your voter registration? I'm like, cool, now I don't have to do another thing. Just do it for me. Awesome. But what they're saying is like somebody who is not registered to vote at all comes through a different state service, whatever agency service you're coming through, and even like federal rental assistance programs would do the same thing. And the person is, unless they opt out, automatically registered to vote. And so the state has to have this system in place for their state agencies to do this thing. And then there's like these windows for opt out and then how the state has to deal with that. But it was something that was just surprising to me was that then they went a step further and were like, but you can't make any more barriers where people have to tell you about their citizenship because we know you're going to try to do that and try to get extra information that you don't even have right now, saying that you need it for voter registration. And then you have all these people who are worried to go use state services because they're worried that they're going to be checking on their citizenship. And so I thought that was a brilliant move to layer on that, but don't do this. Did you guys catch that in that section of the voter registration?
Yeah, for sure. What did I wrote? I wrote something about that. I do feel that is a great thing. The process would definitely, and like you mentioned, my biggest gripe was the qualifying questions that they ask people, because that can open up. I'm glad that they put that parameter that you'd only ask questions that's necessary, that you don't ask questions that are unnecessary, because we know, especially living in Texas close to the border, that can absolutely be problematic. And I like the idea that you're giving the option to. I think when I renewed my license in Texas, they sent me with my renewal piece of paper that they gave me. They gave me a card that said that how I could register to vote. And then when I got my license, it came with a card that told me that I could register to vote. But the idea that I didn't have to go the extra step further, because I will say when I did register to vote, I didn't receive anything in the mail to let me know that I still do not have a voter registration card.
Really? I got mine like that from Texas. I was like, okay. And you know what? Because it's Texas, when I had to go vote for that last election, I took that card with, and this is the first time in my life I took that card anywhere out of my house, because I was like, no, ma'am, you are not going to ask me as if I am not registered here. Because I knew it was the first time I voted in Harris County. So
I knew when I looked it up to see that all you needed was your driver's license, and I was just like, if they tell me I can't, then it's not really much that I can do.
I would have
I
lost
called,
it.
I tried to do everything that they said that you should do, and I still to this day have not received a voter registration card in the mail.
Damn.
Which
Wow,
is crazy.
that's interesting. Well, welcome everybody who's joining our live. I'm going to try to reset our live. There's a bunch of people who cycled through, so some folks might come back, or people might watch it as a replay, as an IG live that I'll put on my IG TV, so folks can, if you missed any of the discussion, you can go back and watch it later. But we've been talking about all the cool stuff that we like in this bill, and there's a couple of things we're talking about: automatic voter registration and how that's beneficial. Yeah, did you have any thoughts on that though? Because I think that it's everybody this kind of benefits in a way.
I was just going to chime in with the unnecessary questions. I sit on a board for my county, and we help new moms that have just had babies with lactation consulting, any kind of food resources, diapers, different things like that. And any of the Hispanic moms or immigrant moms, they don't want any of the resources because they don't know how this is going to play out later on. And they have to be identified so that the nonprofits can know who the recipients were. And those questions, they don't want to be involved with any of it. And I was just like, nope. It's crazy that there are so many tricks and traps, but this is supposed to be the land of the free.
It's supposed to be, and we're all supposed to be able to actually vote. But here we are having this conversation. And I think that we said something earlier about, I wanted to go back to it. Shoot, I was just thinking of it when you were saying the filling out the forms. So the barriers. It's interesting that there's some pieces in here that are like transparency sort of situations where like the state has to put their policies on a website. Like they have to do certain things related to transparency, and they have to do stuff that's going to increase access, including for people who have disabilities. And so I thought that was really cool that they're going as far as telling states, hey, we know that these people have been marginalized and they actually have the right to vote. We're not talking about people who aren't citizens. We're talking about people who are citizens who have had barriers that y'all have put up because of mail-in ballots or whatever. And these people have the right to vote, but they can't exercise that. And so there was a couple pieces in there that stood out to me to just say, hey, these populations are getting a big come up on being able to have that equity piece for them in this way, which I really thought, I appreciated that part of it. And I don't know if y'all saw that too as well.
Yeah, for sure. That I had put I made a few lists. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things that would be barriers to marginalized people who try to vote. And then I also was just listening to the news about the mail-in ballots for people who are 65 and older. Texas has a very specific mail-in ballot rule where you can only do a mail-in ballot if you're not over the age of 65, if you were out of the country, or if you have a sickness that stops you from being able to vote in person. And I think Mayor Hidalgo, Judge Hidalgo, she pointed out how many applications they had to reject, because the new stipulations is that you have to put either your social security number on the card before you mail it, or mail it with a copy of your driver's license. If you're 65 and older, okay, that's just a barrier. Like, why?
Are they like at Kinko's with their drivers?
And I'm just thinking to myself, if you have no one there that can help you, and then you have these barriers of, if somebody helps you, did they sway you this way? And you have all these things that they're trying to put in place. It's just, they're elderly. Like, they probably don't even have a valid driver's license. I actually had a client that he had a driver's license, but it wasn't valid. And when I was trying to help him, his granddaughter had to take him to get a new license, because I couldn't help him with what we were doing because his license wasn't valid. If he didn't have her, then what?
Yeah, I got caught up in that with my grandmother at the end of her life. We had some things to do, and they were like, she needs to go get a real ID. I was like, are you for real? This is a bedridden woman. How am I going to go sit her in the DMV line for hours trying to get her real ID? Come now. This is ridiculous. So needless to say, she did not get a final license. Wow. Yeah, exactly. When they told me that, I was like, bro, it's not going to happen. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to also mention in here. So people who are just joining us, we're just going through rapping about what's in the bill, just non-nonchalantly, but there was a couple important parts that I want to make sure we talk about. So I mentioned the online voting registration, which is, again, this is getting to that increased access thing. But then they also go as far as saying your polling place has to be available online. So you should be able to look it up. And I think this is great because they're moving more towards our generations who want the information online. Don't mail it to me. I don't know where my snail mail is. And don't do that. But if you give it to me in an online fashion that I can search for, or I can find, it's more accessible to me. But we still have to think about those older generations who do actually need something mailed to them. Reducing barriers both ways is great. And then same day voter registration is a big one. And then there has to be a minimum early voting period. And that the states have to allow that curbside voting, which is really important with COVID, and to make sure that we have that still. So I don't know if you guys had any opinions on all of those things as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
But I was thinking about when you were saying your bedridden grandmother, like, those old people are scared of the internet. So they do need both ways. They do need things made. They look forward to talking to their postman, especially when they may not get any visitors all day. So I'm just trying to find out, what is the actual end goal in this voter suppression? So we don't want any votes, or we don't want certain votes, or what is the goal?
We don't want certain votes. Yeah. I think that's the name of the game.
But you're just deciding for me. What if I want to vote for your side and you're suppressing my vote? So that's just crazy.
It's a risk, right? It's a risk for people who think that they are, again, categorizing big groups of people and saying this big swath of people is going to think this way. Well, maybe because you traditionally marginalize all those people, so they ain't going to like you. So now you come with your racist policies still, and you keep coming at me with your racist policies. What am I going to do? I'm not going to vote for you.
No.
That's not how it's going to work. And I think that's the recognition is, well, then I'm just going to make sure it's harder for you to actually vote.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem, but I'm glad that really that like it. I get mad at bills that are like hundreds and thousands of pages, but when it outlines this, because it's so necessary, I think that it's important that they have it. So we definitely need to make sure that we reach out to all of our senators and tell them, call their office right now. They are still there. Tell them we want you to vote. You can look online right now and find the office telephone number, and you can reach someone in the office. More than likely right now they're probably still there, and get somebody to and tell them, listen, this is where you need to vote. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And they all have an email form on their website. Like,
Yep.
let's not even get it twisted. It takes you 2 seconds to Google who they are if you don't know, go to their website, click the email me button, put your copy and paste thing that is in my Instagram. Like, it's literally there for you. Thank you, April, for creating that. I was like, let me just make this easy for people and copy it here so you can copy it into the email and then just write your name on it. But if you really want to tell a personal story, that's what they need. They need to understand what this looks like for those of us who are here in the communities. And so often, what I was mentioning the other day on Clubhouse is that people think voting is their only opportunity to participate in the civic process. And they forget that throughout the year, there's 364 other days of advocacy possibilities that we could be exercising in different ways. And when we have these types of conversations and realize we're not the only ones, there's power in those numbers all getting together and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And so there's a lot of opportunity for templates, for resources, for folks to come and say, hey, people like you all who are on this Instagram who know how to do this advocacy thing, I'm interested in whatever, help me out. And I think that's where you really get the beautiful synergy at the community level to try to move some of this stuff forward, because otherwise we're all just different drops in the bucket without organization. So yeah, so that's cool stuff. Okay, go for it.
I was just gonna say, I commend you for putting it in your bio, making it accessible, because sometimes people are like, how many steps do I have to take? Okay, I have to do this. It's already done for you. Everything's fine. Just copy, paste, put your name, bada bing, bada boom.
Yep. Yep. And that was April's doing. April sent me this thing. I guess we need to get out. We need to send it to people. Even if it's like the day of, I don't care, because it's still helpful to people to have a template. And I think that sometimes folks just don't have the time they might have the time to go push a button, but they don't have the time to come up with the words. So if somebody can shortcut something for them, it's a lot easier. Okay. Another thing I think is cool in here that I wanted to mention, and I'm too. It's about there are some reforms. Like I'm not the reformist. I will be honest. Like I'm like a very structured federalist policy person. So I think it's cool when I'm excited about reforms. But there is definitely like finance reform in here, and there was redistricting reform, which I was just like, hallelujah! Can somebody stop redistricting every 5 years, every 2 years? So they do put a term on how long you can go after you've done those kinds of things to redo it again. And I think that is a bit of a safeguard. Now, I think, April, I'm sure there's like way better beyond that kind of ways to control this redistricting problem, but I was just really happy that they even put it in there.
Yeah, I think that is what you mentioned. It's good that it's in this bill, because apparently the John Lewis bill is not, nobody wants to vote on, at least the Republicans don't want to vote on that at all. And that bill would have done exactly that. That bill specifically speaks to making sure that if they put any type of policies in place that maybe it has to run through a process before it can become law. I think that's important that it's at least that it's in this bill. I would like for the John Lewis Act to move forward as well, but shoot, we can't even get the Freedom Vote Act. I don't know if we're gonna get the John Lewis Act. So
right. Okay. What can we get? Can we get something? Give us our little crumbs, please.
Right.
That's ridiculous. All right. So I think that the last one I want to mention that is a great safeguard. I saw this and I immediately saw the purpose in it, which is to protect victims' information. So even though a lot of our voting information is public record, people can figure out my address and my voting registration in Texas. Like y'all can come to my house if you need to. But it's amazing that we don't have protections for women who have been victims of trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, like all of these offenses where you need these people to be safe from their predator, and yet you're out here like you can't register to vote accurately in the place that you need to be voting because somebody's going to get your info and come and harm you. So there is, some information here that says states have to put in place a protection for the information of these people. Now, when I think about these kind of policies, I'm like, then of course these people have to probably have reported it, right? So now you're automatically telling me that I need to report rape, which we know a lot of rape goes unreported. But then you're telling me I probably had to have some sort of either conviction or reason to say that I need this protection. And I could still see states weaponizing this against people who fall into this category. So although it's there, again, I think, April, there is a potential for this to go awry in the implementation, but I was just curious if y'all had any opinions on that.
I think it's crazy. I was applying to be on the board for a domestic violence nonprofit, and she was saying that there are no laws if you're married to a rapist. If you get raped by a random stranger, they can go to jail. That's that. But if your husband comes home and he beats you up and rapes you, he just sleeps in the other room. So just looking at all of these crazy laws, but then you jump through these huge hoops just to make people not vote. And that's just crazy. You catch more flies with honey. If they just do everything and be more healing and palatable, but you look different and you sound different and your hair is different. So I don't want to get to know you. So I'm going to put up barriers to block you from voting. I don't want anything to benefit you. And I just think that's so crazy.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm going to find multiple ways for it not to benefit you too on top of that.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the questions before you start, April, is what should we do? Should we email Congress, the House, or both, or what do we do? So April, do you want to add to your response the what to do part?
Yeah, so the House has already approved this bill, but I say send it to all of them again. Send it to all of them again.
Cool. Okay, yeah. So April, what were you going to say about the domestic violence part of the victims protection information part of it?
I was just going to say that I think that that we need those protections. Me personally, I hate that our information is so readily available to anybody because we don't live in the same grand scheme the way we used to. So I think I am a proponent of the privacy of your personal information. If you have a business, yes, but I understand why, because you have to know it's a whole scheme of things as to why your information is readily available. Because if my next door neighbor goes, I don't know who my neighbor's full name is, and he goes and he damages my car or something, I have to know who he is and have a way of finding out who he is, because he's not going to tell me who he is. But I think that for victims of domestic violence, I think this is very important, because far too often it goes where they're trying to figure out how to protect themselves, and then they don't have a means of protecting themselves because their information is readily available. So I think that this is important.
Yeah, no. And I think that we don't do enough to really help make people who have suffered from some sort of domestic violence, trafficking, or that experience, to just help them in general with the trauma of it. And then you're going to add on to it, you can't participate in things that you should be able to participate into, like voting. It's just like a double, triple slap in the face to have some of these policies that aren't in place just by them not being there with the protection. So yes, I think that this was, one last one. Yes. So also there's some stuff around public holidays. So voting would be a legal public holiday, which I think it should be, honestly, but then also the pre-voting, any requirements can't conflict with other holidays, which I think is probably smart. Like, why did we not deduplicate holidays in the first place? But then there was also increased protections for election workers. And then on top of that, they were like, you cannot say that people can't volunteer and give food and water to people who've been waiting in line forever, as we saw last time, 5 hours in Milwaukee, and people are sitting there trying to vote, and you're telling them, it basically, as long as they can't give you something that'll sway politically, whatever it is, so nothing with a candidate's name on the water or anything like that, but volunteers who are giving you a nondescript water should be allowed. And so that was also in there for the polling day stuff. So that I thought those things were pretty important too.
I have a question, and maybe can answer this, April. I'm not sure. Why can't we vote over consecutive days? Because there's no reason it should take 5 hours. There's no reason you should drive more than 5 to 10 miles to your next drop box. So I was wondering, is there anything that they have been even discussing as far as simplifying the process, or just putting all the energy into suppressing the vote? Let the baby cry. Just let the baby cry. You're a mom. Come on.
Yeah, babies cry on me on Clubhouse all day, every day. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly why they do that, but what I will say is to what Wendy was talking about. I do think that is good that they have that because oh gosh, sorry guys, hold on one second.
It's funny. I'm just waving at people who join us. Hey, Brandon. Or not Brandon. Fred. Sorry, Fred. Brandon.
Think of that. And go back to what you were saying about the trauma, because that's more my lane. Law is her lane. But every day you can reignite someone's trauma just by having a conversation with them and people being fearful. That's why people use aliases on social media, because people can look you up, your first and last name, what state you're in, and bada bing, they're knocking at your door. And they say, I feel like we're friends. I saw you on live. I look at all your content, so I feel like I know you. And then they're knocking at your door. So having someone who's on the run from their offender for years and years, just to have a Google search and they're outside.
Oh my gosh, I have a story about that actually. So in my lifetime, I've had several stalkers, and one of them, when I lived in Maryland and I worked at the federal government, I came into a voicemail from one of them I hadn't spoken to in 10 years, and it was basically like, I found your internet information because federal employees have all their information all over the internet, so here's my way to reach out to you at work. I was just like, no, oh my gosh, it was just, I couldn't even believe that anybody would have the audacity to do that. But people do that kind of stuff. And when your information's out there and you're out there, you're like us building a business, so you have to be out there. And people knowing your name is part of the trust and know and like. It's right. A little difficult to say, no, please don't find me in my house. You're not allowed to come here. Yeah, so I think, so April, did you want to close up with anything now that you're back?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that with the food and the lines and them making it specific, I think that's important because a lot of the areas, no, you can't get down, baby. a lot of the areas where a lot of minority people are concentrated, they live in areas where they're already limiting the number of places where people can vote, and they're waiting in these long lines. And then there was talk of, I think I want to say in Georgia, that they had closed a lot of their polling places at 5:00. So then really the only place that you can go to vote is on the day that voting is happening. So I think that them putting that specifically in the bill is important because there are long lines in places where there are a lot of people, and that's something that you can't plan for, specifically on election day when everything that you think could go wrong goes wrong on election day. So I think that
consecutive day, that's why it should be extended. That's why they should be a little closer together. Like you have a liquor store on every corner. Why don't you have polling places?
Why don't you put it at the liquor store? See how much traffic you get there. But I think, yeah, you're right. There's so many barriers and solutions. But I will say that I was pretty happy with the young gentleman who took over elections here that Judge Hidalgo had put in place for the last, I know he's no longer there, but forget his name, that he whipped up some COVID policy. Let me tell you, because I actually had it come to my desk when I worked at the county, so pre-release, they had procedures, they had volunteer, like everything, every little thing had a documented procedure for how people were going to be safely voting. And I got to give him props because him and his team whipped that up so fast when every industry was struggling to put in place some sort of standard to keep folks safe. Even the grocery store was still struggling at this point to keep folks safe. And this guy came in and was like, oh no, we're going to vote. And not only we're going to get our voting on, and we're going to do it safely, and I'm going to try to minimize barriers. And he had the drive-through voting plan was on lock. Every single thing was on lock. So I got to say, even for the shenanigans that went on here last election in Harris County, props to, I forget his name, whatever that dude is. I'm going to go find it later and put it in the post. But seriously, their policy was on just point for getting access down and getting safety down. And that's something that I can say we didn't have lines like that here. Like, we actually had a pretty smooth process. And for a giant city like this, in this Harris County area, this, what is it, 6 million people? It's amazing how many people we got here. So for us to be able to successfully participate in the civic process and have, you know, COVID be around and be safe about it, I'm hopeful for this jurisdiction. So that's what I'll say.
So April, can you tell us the best case scenario and the worst case scenario if we don't write our senators and Congress people?
So the best case scenario is that everybody gets the right to vote, and we can go into this midterm election knowing that we did everything to ensure that everybody who wants to vote has the right to vote. If we don't do it, then we take the risk of the exact opposite happening, and then we see already what has transpired in the presidential election that just happened in the primaries. It can be that times 10. So we just need to make sure that we're doing our part as individuals, speaking to our representatives, telling them what we want. I think that's part of the problem with the whole "my vote doesn't count." Have you done everything to ensure that your vote does count? And one thing that for sure, let me tell you, I write to Senator Ted Cruz. I'm pretty sure I probably would have met him by now because he's an attorney too. But because of COVID, we don't have like our lawyer functions and stuff like that. But I'm certain that because I email him every time I have a problem, I'm sending a message to somebody to let them know that, hey, this is my problem, and they respond. So if you want, and then you on their websites, a lot of their websites, you can set up a meeting with them if you want to meet with them. So they work for you, and they're more, because they probably don't get a lot of people that reach out to them as often. I had a friend that told me a story that she worked in Georgia for a legislature, and the legislature that she worked for literally got, I think she said 10 or 20 phone calls, and those 10 or 20 phone calls made him change the way he was going to vote on a particular bill. So we have to do our part in exercising our voice and making sure that we're participating in the process, because you can't say the process isn't working for you if you're not doing what you're supposed to do to participate in the process.
And I think especially the in that purple red state kind of area, right? If we are really trying to move the needle, that's where we need people like us to go and say, oh no, Ted Cruz, let me give you an earful about what I think about this. And it's consistent actions. We have to keep on it, and we have to keep giving people those tools to be able to do it. And so if you guys are watching, the last post in my Instagram has the letter that April wrote that you can just copy into your email and send it right now. You literally can go out of the live if you want. We'll let you go and take that and go and put it into your senator's website in the little email me button and just click go, because there's still, April, I think they haven't even started the vote yet. The last thing you said was 7:45 Eastern.
Yeah, so
But they still
I haven't looked at it yet, but as far as I know, they haven't done anything because they were still talking. And if they're going to do a filibuster, this will probably go into tomorrow.
Yes, the famous filibuster, which I'm curious to watch the highlights of that. I like to watch the highlights, especially when they start bringing out cartoon characters on easels. That's my favorite. They're like, and this guy said in 1964 in this cartoon. You're like, bro, you're making policy off cartoons now. So anyways, I digress. This has been so fun. Thank you guys. You guys are the first people I've had on Instagram Live this year. So I'm super thankful for you both taking the time to chat with me. And I love policy nerds. So if you guys ever want to come back and talk about another policy, I am always down to talk about this kind of stuff because I think it's important. And especially, Nick, because you do all kinds of stuff. Oh, yeah. Oh, and awesome. And Michelle just posted in the chat for this how to find your member. So if you don't know, there's a link in the chat right now on the live. So
isn't there another bill on the table right now? There are two things we're voting on, right, April? The voting and another one, right? What's the other one?
Well, they were doing voting and John Lewis. Those were the two bills that were, and the John Lewis bill, no, they don't want accountability. So that one is probably going to not even, people are not even talking about that the way they were before, because it's almost like it's not going to happen.
Well, and I think that a lot of that bill did get subsumed into this one. So in some of the analysis I was looking at, they were like, it's parallel now. Like it was one of those like good enough sort of situations. So if that bill doesn't go forward, we still have some of those protections in this one. And I think that's why people maybe are putting it a little bit on the back burner, because they feel like if you put a lot of emphasis here and this goes forward, it gives us something, but maybe not everything. So that was my take on why people stopped talking about it. But anyways, but you guys are always welcome back to come and talk about this stuff, because like I said, I love this kind of thing. This is my jam. I love to go through policy documents of 100 pages and do little notes and things, because I think it's important for people to understand that the policy is nothing without the actual action, but we can influence both the policy and the action. And so that's always where there's room to advocate at the state level, the local level. So even though we're saying, hey, go contact your members, don't stop there. If you had local issues with voting in your area and it didn't go smooth, like we were talking about Harris County went pretty smooth, if yours didn't go smooth, before the next election, let your local officials know that these are the things that need to be changed so that you can have better conditions in your area. So don't stop with just this bill. Always, keep thinking about the other next steps. So thank you, ladies, for being here, and have a wonderful night. And bye, everyone.
One thing I want to add is tomorrow I'm going to have a room on Clubhouse at 6 o'clock Central Time. And I actually changed the topic to talk about this voting bill, and we should have some more information to share tomorrow. So please, if you're available, come join us.
What club is that in?
It's going to be in Clubhouse.
But no, it's under a particular club in Clubhouse?
It's under My Hair is Professional Club in Clubhouse.
Say that again?
My Hair is Professional Club.
My Hair is Professional Club. Oh, I like that. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go rock on and get that club info for that room, and then I'll put it in my story. That way, if folks are looking, and if y'all want to put it in your stories, that way people know where to find that room and get the update tomorrow, so we can keep the conversation going. And then hopefully some folks who are in the live today can pop over there and give us their thoughts too, maybe tomorrow. So cool. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks everybody for joining us. And if you're watching this on IGTV, definitely reach out to my wonderful women here who are so amazing at what they do, because we all have our talents, and these are two of our rock stars in our community.
Now that you've joined our community by listening to this podcast episode, I welcome you to participate in a conversation with our collective very soon. I'm Wendy V, or Wendy Velos, and you can find me on all of the major social media platforms and at wendyvelos.com. I provide solutions so you can make a bigger impact and you can change the world. Until the next episode, I hope that you will continue thriving, continue learning, and continue growing so that we can all work together to elevate and level up.